October 14, 1975, 11:43 p.m., a private, unmarked hangar on the outskirts of Medellin. Rain hammers against the corrugated tin roof, a relentless, deafening rhythm that drowns out the distant hum of the city. Inside, the air is thick, choking on the smell of high-octane jet fuel and the cloying scent of cheap lavender cologne. Sovereignty. That is the only word that matters in this room. In the center of the hangar, under the harsh glare of a single swinging halogen bulb, stands a man known only as El Flaco. He is a messenger, a conduit, and right now he is the most terrified man in Colombia. His cheap suit is damp, not from the rain, but from a cold sweat that has soaked through his shirt, plastering the fabric to his spine. His hands, holding a thick, cream-colored envelope, are trembling so violently that the paper makes a soft, rattling sound, like dry leaves in a wind. The envelope bears a wax seal, the crest of a developing organization that calls itself the Company, but the world will soon know as the Medellin Cartel. Standing 10 feet away from him is Griselda Blanco. She is not screaming. She is not pacing. She is statuesque, a monolith of calm in a room vibrating with tension. She wears a silk blouse that costs more than El Flaco will earn in a lifetime. She lights a cigarette, the flare of the lighter illuminating her eyes, black, flat, and completely devoid of fear. She takes a long drag, holds the smoke in her lungs as if savoring the flavor of the moment, and exhales a slow, grey plume toward the ceiling. El Flaco clears his throat. The sound is dry, pathetic. He has delivered the message verbally before handing over the letter. The message is a death sentence wrapped in administrative language. Griselda Blanco is banned from Medellin. She is to cease operations, she is to retire, or she is to be removed. Griselda looks at the envelope, then at El Flaco. She smiles. It isn't a warm smile. It is the smile of a predator watching prey stumble. She whispers, her voice cutting through the noise of the rain like a razor through silk. "Tell him I accept, but he forgot to check the cargo hold." El Flaco blinks, confused. He turns his head slowly, looking past Griselda toward the twin-engine aircraft parked in the shadows of the hangar. The cargo bay door is open. It isn't empty. It is stacked floor to ceiling with duffel bags. But these aren't her bags. They are stamped with the logo of a distinct logistics company, a company owned by Pablo Escobar. She hasn't just received a banishment order. In the last hour, while Pablo was writing threats, she was seizing his assets. She is holding the king's own merchandise hostage. This was the night the godmother forced the world to hold its breath. To understand how we reached this precipice, where a single woman stood toe-to-toe with an army, you have to understand the landscape of the mid-1970s. This is the volatile transition period, the Wild West era of the trade, before it became a corporate empire. Griselda Blanco is already a legend in Miami. She is the pioneer. She paved the asphalt highways of the trade with blood and ingenuity. She invented the motorcycle assassin. She designed the secret compartments in women's undergarments to move product. She operates on instinct, on fury, on a chaotic brilliance that makes her impossible to predict. She is an ecosystem unto herself. On the other side, rising like a dark sun in the valley of Medellin, is Pablo Escobar. He is the architect. To him, crime is not about passion. It is about mathematics. It is about logistics, spreadsheets, and bribes. He represents the new order, a sterilized corporate hierarchy where everyone has a rank and everyone is replaceable. To Pablo, Griselda is not a colleague. She is chaos. She is loud. She draws heat. And in his vision of a streamlined, monopolized industry, chaos is a liability that must be managed or excised. The system he is building is run by men who believe women belong in the kitchen or the church, not at the head of the table negotiating tonnage. The ban issued tonight isn't just about territory. It is about cleaning house. It is an existential threat. Pablo is attempting to cut Griselda's supply line at the source, effectively firing her from the industry she helped build. He wants her to retire to a quiet life or die in a loud one. But Pablo has made a critical error, a fatal miscalculation born of arrogance. He mistakes Griselda's recent silence in Miami for weakness. He assumes that because she buys from his labs, she relies on his infrastructure to move the product. He views her as a customer, not a competitor. He does not know. And this is the curiosity debt that keeps men like Rivi, her fixer, awake at night, that Griselda has compromised his head of logistics in Miami. For the last 6 months, Griselda hasn't just been selling cocaine. She has been buying information. She has been buying insurance files. She has compromised a customs officer at the port of entry, a man who holds the keys to Pablo's new supply route. She isn't dependent on the system. She has infiltrated it like a virus. Back in the hangar, the tension has shifted. The air is no longer just heavy. It is pressurized. Rivi, Griselda's right-hand man and voice of reason, stands in the periphery. He is a pragmatic man. He sees this for what it is, a suicide mission. You do not steal from Pablo Escobar. You do not hold his product ransom. Rivi wipes sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief, watching Griselda with a mixture of loyalty and absolute dread. He knows that if they walk out of this hangar, they are walking into a war against an army that outnumbers them 100 to 1. Griselda turns to Rivi. Her face is unreadable. "Get the package," she says. Rivi hesitates. "Madrina, if we send this, there is no going back. He will burn Miami to the ground." "He thinks he owns the fire, Rivi," she replies, her voice low. "I am the fuel." Rivi nods, defeated by her intensity. He walks to the back of a black sedan parked near the hangar doors. He retrieves a small, square box wrapped in plain brown paper. It looks innocent. It looks like a birthday gift. But inside that box is a token that carries more weight than a bomb. It is a silver-plated baby shoe. In the underworld, objects speak a language louder than words. A dead fish means you sleep with the fishes. A bullet in an envelope means you are marked. But a baby shoe? A silver-plated memento of childhood? It is a terrifying symbol. It represents the future generation. It represents legacy. By sending this to Hacienda Nápoles, Griselda is not threatening Pablo's life. She knows he doesn't fear death, he expects it. She is threatening his immortality. She is telling him silently, "I know where your children sleep. I know where your legacy lives." It is a psychological nuclear strike. The ban from Pablo was designed to shut down her business for 48 hours, to cause panic in her ranks, to make her soldiers defect to the winning side. And for a moment, it worked. The phone lines in Miami went dead. The product stopped moving. Her captains looked at each other with fear in their eyes, wondering if it was time to jump ship. But Griselda didn't call a meeting. She didn't negotiate. She didn't beg for a percentage. She executed the seizure of the plane in the hangar, and now she is preparing to send the box. She hands the package to El Flaco, the trembling messenger. He takes it with both hands, as if it contains nitroglycerin. "Give this to him," she commands. "Tell him he has 4 minutes to decide if he wants his plane back or if he wants to see what else I have in my collection." El Flaco nods, too scared to speak, and backs away into the rain, the box clutched to his chest. Griselda watches him leave. She turns back to the open cargo hold of the plane, looking at the millions of dollars of product she has just effectively stolen from the most dangerous man on earth. She takes another drag of her cigarette. The smoke curls around her face. This is the moment the world stopped. The king of cocaine had blinked. He had tried to corner a tiger, forgetting that the tiger owns the jungle, not the zookeeper. But the war hasn't even started yet. The package is on its way. And when Pablo opens that box, when he sees the silver shoe, the response will not be a phone call. It will be a silence that deafens the entire country. Because Griselda just proved that while Pablo might have the silver, she has the lead. The package arrived at Hacienda Nápoles exactly 4 hours later. It didn't go through the usual security checkpoints. It didn't pass through the hands of the perimeter guards or the house staff. It was waiting on the pillow of the master bedroom. How it got there is a detail that has been debated by smugglers and DEA agents for 50 years. Some say a maid was bribed with a year's salary. Others say Griselda had a shadow inside the inner circle all along. But the method didn't matter. The placement did. When Pablo Escobar walked into that room, the air conditioning was humming, chilling the humid air of the Magdalena Valley. He saw the brown paper wrapping. He saw the box. And then he saw the silver-plated baby shoe. For the first time in his professional life, the architect froze. He didn't yell. He didn't call for his hitmen. He sat on the edge of the bed and stared at that small, shimmering object. He understood the message immediately. It wasn't about the plane she had seized in Medellin. It wasn't about the cocaine she was holding hostage. It was a geography lesson. Griselda was telling him, "You control the streets, but I can walk into your bedroom." The phone on the bedside table rang. It was a private line, a number known to fewer than 5 people in the entire world. Pablo picked it up. He didn't speak. He just listened to the breathing on the other end. "Dawn, Opa-locka Airport," Griselda's voice whispered, static crackling over the international line. "Send your cousin, alone." The line went dead. The next 6 hours were a masterclass in psychological agony. The sun began to bleed over the horizon in Miami, painting the sky in bruises of purple and orange. The Opa-locka tarmac was wet with morning dew. It was a desolate stretch of concrete, far away from the commercial terminals, surrounded by tall sawgrass that could hide a battalion of snipers. At 5:43 a.m., a convoy of 3 black sedans rolled onto the tarmac. They moved slowly, like hearses. Griselda stood by the nose of the seized aircraft. She wasn't hiding. She stood in plain sight, wearing white linen pants and large sunglasses, smoking a cigarette with a terrifying calmness. Rivi stood behind her, his hand resting casually inside his jacket, gripping the handle of a suppressed MAC-10. Flanking them were 6 of her most loyal soldiers, men who had been with her since the Queen's days. The sedans stopped 50 yards away. The doors opened. Out stepped Gustavo, Pablo's cousin and closest confidant. He looked tired. His eyes scanned the tree line, the hangar roofs, the shadows of the plane. He expected an ambush. In his world, you don't invite someone to a meeting after stealing their plane unless you plan to execute them publicly. Gustavo walked forward, his hands raised to show he was unarmed, though everyone knew the men in the cars behind him were heavily armed. The distance between them closed. 50 yards, 30, 10. The only sound was the wind rushing through the sawgrass and the distant whine of a turbine engine warming up. Gustavo stopped 5 feet from Griselda. He looked at the plane, Pablo's plane, loaded with Pablo's product. Then he looked at her. "The patron received your gift," Gustavo said. His voice was steady but tight. "He sends his regards." Griselda didn't respond immediately. She took a final drag of her cigarette and flicked the butt onto the wet concrete near Gustavo's polished shoes. "The plane is refueled," she said. "The cargo is untouched. The pilot is waiting in the cockpit." Gustavo frowned. This didn't make sense. In the calculus of the cartel, leverage is used to extract payment. You don't steal $1 million just to give it back. "What is the price, Madrina?" Gustavo asked. "What is the tax?" He was reaching into his jacket pocket, prepared to hand over a negotiable bearer bond, a promise of payment, territory concessions, anything to buy back the shipment. Griselda laughed. It was a dry, sharp sound. "There is no tax," she signaled to Rivi. He tossed a set of keys to Gustavo, who caught them reflexively. "I don't want his money," Griselda said, stepping closer, invading his personal space until she could smell the coffee on his breath. "I want him to know that I gave this back to him. I want him to know that today he is rich because I allowed him to be rich." It was the ultimate inversion. If she had demanded money, she would have been just another business partner negotiating a deal. By giving it back for free, she established superiority. She was telling the Medellin cartel that they operated in Miami by her grace, not by their power. She wasn't fighting for profit. She was fighting for sovereignty. Gustavo stood there holding the keys, processing the weight of the moment. He realized, perhaps for the first time, that they were dealing with something ancient and primal, something that didn't fit into their corporate flowcharts. He reached into his inner pocket again. The soldiers behind Griselda tensed, fingers tightening on triggers. Rivi stepped forward, shielding her. But Gustavo didn't pull a gun. He pulled out a folded piece of heavy, cream-colored stationery. He handed it to Griselda. She unfolded it. It wasn't a typed letter, it was handwritten. There were no threats, no demands. It was a new map of the distribution routes in South Florida. The ban lines had been erased. Her territory was marked in ink, ratified by the king himself. He says the city is too big for one king, Gustavo said quietly, but big enough for a queen. Griselda looked at the map, then folded it and slipped it into her pocket. She didn't say thank you. She simply nodded. "Tell him to keep the shoe," she whispered, "so he never forgets how small his world really is." She turned her back on him, a fatal mistake in any other context, but a calculated display of dominance here, and walked toward her car. Gustavo watched her go. He watched the woman who had just stared down the most dangerous organization on the planet and won without firing a single shot. He got back into his car, the silver keys heavy in his hand, and signaled the convoy to turn around. In the next 72 hours, the landscape of the drug trade shifted tectonically. The Miami supply routes reopened, flowing faster than ever. The streets whispered. The low-level dealers, the stash house guards, the port officials, they all heard the story. They heard that the godmother had blessed the king, not the other way around. In 6 months, the Medellin cartel was fully formed, an industrial giant that would consume the world. But in Miami, Griselda Blanco operated autonomously. A respectful distance was maintained. The company learned the rule that would hold for nearly a decade. You can negotiate with the police, you can bribe the judges, but you never dictate terms to the madrina. She had secured her crown not by eating her young, as the old saying goes, but by threatening to eat theirs. It brings us to the final law of the jungle. In a world of monsters, the most dangerous creature isn't the one with the biggest teeth. It's the one who is willing to burn the whole forest down just to prove they own the matches. Griselda Blanco proved that power isn't given. It isn't even taken. It is demonstrated. And that leaves a question that hangs over this story like smoke in a hangar. If you stood on that tarmac, holding the leverage that could destroy your greatest enemy, would you have the discipline to give it back just to prove a point? Or would you have pulled the trigger and started a war you couldn't finish? Ask yourself that before you judge the woman who made the king blink. If you want to know what happened when the truce finally broke and why the streets of Miami eventually turned red, make sure you're subscribed. There is another story waiting for you right here.